Now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, and that's Andrew Chrostowski. Andrew joined the Realware team in December of 2016 as chairman of our advisory board. Prior to Realware, Andrew was president of Tyco's Life and Safety, a billion-dollar business made up of Scott Safety and Tyco Gas and Flame. They're global leaders in personal protective products and gas and flame detection, civil defense, military, and industrial markets. He was also an instrumental leader in the Tyco-Johnson Controls merger. Before Tyco, Andrew was vice president and general manager of airborne systems at UTC and a number of other senior executive positions. Andrew is a former Air Force officer, physicist, systems engineer, and graduate of Wharton. And bottom line, if we asked to hear the quintessential voice of the customer, Andrew is that. So please welcome Andrew Chrostowski.
Thank you. Okay, am I live? Is this working? Good. So first of all, let me just say I'm painfully aware that I'm between you and lunch. Okay, so I promise to be pithy in terms of how we handle this, but I'm so excited to be part of the Realware team that I don't want to rush through some of the thoughts I'd like to share with you. There's very little I think I can add to the functionality and the value of this product that you haven't heard this morning, but I'm going to try to give you some color. And maybe if you walk away with that color, you'll appreciate a bit of what has gotten me so excited about this business. So first, I want to thank the entire Realware team for allowing me to join you. As Chris was introducing me, it probably comes across as basically physicist, technologist, okay, geek, right? And a better word for it. And how much coolness can we have today when we've covered Boba Fett, we've covered Star Wars, Star Trek, right? And I heard in the green room, I heard us talking about Stark Industries and Iron Man. So I mean, like, this has got to be as cool as it gets to talk about technology. So thanks for letting me join the team. One of the reasons I think that I can bring some value to this as a customer is that when I was working with the Life Safety Products Group in Tyco, we looked at the situation for firefighters. And firefighters have some of the most challenging work environments of any of our emergency workers. And their equipment has to work, it has to make a difference, and they are probably the most averse to trying to put new technology in the field in every group I've ever worked with, from special forces, military, anyone. These guys, they're not quite Luddites, but they absolutely don't trust new things until they work them out. And when we looked at the way they were working, and you look at how a firefighter had to face the challenge, they were sitting there with maybe a thermal imaging camera in one hand to kind of see through the blackness and the smoke and look for victims. They probably had a haloran or an axe in one hand. Maybe they had to have the hose. And oh, by the way, they still needed their hands to grab and hold onto a victim and lead them to safety. This is a very challenging environment. And we said, what if we could give that firefighter vision? Right? My favorite quote from Twitter when we launched this product was someone called it predator vision. Right? When you give a firefighter the ability to see through it hands-free, when you give him the ability to have information delivered to him hands-free, inside his mask, real time, you give him that ability to completely change the tactics he works with and how he works with his teammates, how he enters a fire, how he executes. And that experience we had from going from a napkin challenge to a sold-out product at the world's biggest trade show for fire equipment at FDIC in 2016 kind of demonstrated the power of this idea that's now been changing the way firefighters are saving lives around the country and around the world. So that kind of got us in this space of talking about wearables and what we're doing with it. So, very important, but I will make a challenge today. So, Chris is out here, he's talking about being in Chicago PD. It's a great program. There's an ancillary program called Chicago Fire. You may have watched it. Okay, Chicago Fire wears Scott Safety products. And one of the things in their television show, and one of the things I challenged as we were coming up with the Scott Sight product, I said, this is so revolutionary. This is changing the way firefighters are going to fight fires. I want that on TV. Well, we showed it to the producers when it was still a prototype. The producers were so excited about what this did, the drama this created, the ability this gave firefighters, that they wrote a 2-episode story arc, including our product. And so if you go back and look in March 16, if you DVR that kind of thing, or go to Hulu, you'll find them opening our Scott product, talking about what it's going to do for them to work, and then actually using it in the episode to save lives. So I'll just say that that kind of product placement cost $0 for us, made a tremendous difference in terms of awareness and capability. I think for first responders, the HMT-1 has the same kind of capability, and I challenge Chris and Andy to go out there and let's get that on Chicago PD. Okay. Let's see. Here's my little thing. Are we live? Yep. Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. Yep. So, hey Siri. Hey Siri. This is great. Hey Siri, set a timer for 15 minutes.
Okay, 15 minutes and counting.
Hands-free, right? The future is voice. You've heard about it here. We're working with it in the environment. Voice, we heard from Chauncey about how it's personal. This is how people solve problems. And I want us to think about how significant this is for the HMT-1. And why are we not advancing here? Yeah, voice control, exactly. Which one of these is the? No, okay. I'm going to have to use my hands. Okay, so it's natural interaction. We work with our hands. We want to talk. So when you are solving a problem with people, when you're working in a team, people are communicating. That is important, and we're getting used to that kind of. That's how we're trained to problem solve. Voice is ubiquitous, right? It is not something that you can't do. You can do it in your car. You have conversations in the kitchen. You have conversations in the living room. You have conversations in the office, right? In the project room. It's something that we're doing on the flight line. Safety, communication, it's ubiquitous. And finally, it is contextual, right? You're doing things while you're getting this information. Well, what I find fascinating about the whole voice world now is that the entire tech community here is training us to use our voice, okay? Whether it's Siri, setting timers, whether it's Cortana, putting a calendar invite on there. Are we there? Are we there now?
Yeah, we're there. Just in the
Okay. All right. So if you're there, if you're looking at Google, right, the Google Assistant, and now even you've seen the commercials for Xfinity, right? They're training us to ask our TV what channel to watch. So we're getting trained, just like we got trained on user interfaces to use the point and click. We got trained on multi-gesture, right? I had the good fortune of having a young grandchild sit in my lap during Christmas. I was reading a Christmas story to her, and she reaches to the picture and does this, right? Like, why isn't this book working the way it should work, right? We've trained people to do multi-gesture. Now we're training ourselves to be comfortable with vocal assistants inside of our homes, inside of our cars, et cetera. So it is happening, and that training is now underway as a user community. Voice is definitely the future. So the key concept I want to talk about for Realware, why it makes a difference, and it was touched on this morning, is that removing friction creates value. Anytime you make something easier, you unleash value that's packed in the system. You don't have to create a new value proposition. You just have to remove the barriers that are operating with that. So as an example, it's the ilities, right? It's maintainability, make something easier to maintain. It's sustainability, it's productivity, right? It's reliability. All these things that you can drive and remove friction makes it easier to operate, creates value. So I think that's the important concept we have to get across here. And so we think about friction. I want to talk about, we talk about the industrial worker, and we talk about what we can do with productivity. I want you to think also about the community of people who maybe don't even have hands to work with. Travis Mills was a staff sergeant on his third tour of Afghanistan 4 days from his 25th birthday, when an IED took away both his legs and most of both of his arms. Think of the friction this guy deals with every day when he is away from his computer, away from his laptop, can't get to his mobile phone, right? And yet has to interact with things that we take for granted that we can interact with, control, manipulate. Think about removing friction from someone like that and now apply it to a worker who has other things to go do, and you get a real visceral feeling for how life-changing I think this technology will be. Not only in the workplace, but I think in other applications as well. So let's talk about the industrial use cases really quick. We've talked about remote monitors. We'll cover a little bit of that. I'm going to cover a little bit about work instructions, about document navigation. All these things lead to having better information contextually. We'll talk a little bit about IoT data visualization, because that's been covered as well. But I think this is huge in terms of overcoming some very real limitations we've got as a business. And finally, a little bit about the mobile forms. These are 5 inherent things that we've built into the HMT-1 for the launch that's ready to be making a difference right away. So let's start with the first one, remote mentoring. It was touched on this morning by a couple of our speakers, right? That when you have remote mentoring, you salvage a service call. Now, I was part of Tyco. Tyco has one of the largest workforces in the world for doing service calls, 35,000 people worldwide. You know, going out, setting your alarm system up, checking your fire system, et cetera. I can't tell you how many times in this complex ecosystem a serviceman shows up at a customer site where their system is down, opens the cabinet and goes, oh, I'm not trained on this system. What happens today? That person closes up the system, tells the customer, I'm so sorry, you're going to be down for another day. I got to go off to my next job, thank you very much. And you've got a dissatisfied customer, you've got extra costs, you've got to send somebody back out there to do that. That is friction that the HMT takes away completely. Because now for the first time he can say, wait a second, I can talk to the expert at Tyco to explain to me what is this panel and what I need to do to execute it. It makes a huge difference. I believe personally, any business that does that kind of service call will pay back this system in 6 months on just salvaging those extra service calls. We talked a little bit about how it raises on-the-job training experience. Now you've got a workforce of people coming in. They're used to having technology. They're used to doing things that sort of inherently. If you ever watch, and this, I recommend this for the older people in the audience here, ones like me who have maybe still remember what a punch card really did. Go look at the YouTube videos of millennials looking at 1970s and 1980s technology and trying to explain how it works. Okay, it is hilarious and it's scary because it's changed so much when they look at this. These people are coming in the workforce expecting stuff to just happen as it does. When it doesn't work that way for them, it's a very frustrating experience, and others have a frustration with working with them. When you create a remote mentor, you can shorten that training phase for these people and make them more productive from the beginning. It increases safety. People will not do something that they're not sure of anymore because they have access to a very frictionless resource to help them through it. Andy has a background in nuclear engineering. It's one of the things that we understand in terms of safety in the Air Force, safety in the Navy. When you have the ability to go in and get an expert opinion on something before you do something that could affect the safety of a ship or an aircraft, you take it. It's a big deal. And finally, I think, which is really exciting here in the Valley, is that this last 6 inches of the industrial internet gives us the ability to exploit the machine learning and artificial intelligence that we're building up everywhere. Think about it. What good is that, right? All this data is being built up about these things if you can't actually have access to it contextually when you're in the field doing what you want to do. And by the way, can't you use this as a way of training AI databases and machine learning to improve that as well? So there's input and output experiences the HMT-1 can facilitate with the right kinds of applications. I think that'll make remote monitoring extremely important. And then again, for field retrofits, for anyone who's done a number of those, and companies like Volkswagen had to go do a lot, right, with the recent recalls. You can take less skilled people who are technically capable, but not particularly trained in that exact procedure, and do it very, very rapidly, so you get speed where you can enable those kind of retrofits. I'm going to put work instructions and document navigator together for a moment, because what it really says is I have information about this process in front of me when I need it, right? So the first thing is it increases quality. Absolutely. If you've ever had a manufacturing process or a process you have to run and it's complicated, What do people do? They migrate to failure. The first work instruction you wrote was probably detailed. It probably involved the worker, an engineer, et cetera. When the next person comes along, guess what happens? They kind of verbally train somebody on it, and then the work instruction kind of gets put on the shelf, and maybe it gets redlined or forgotten. You no longer follow the procedures. And what happens when something changes over? You miss a point and you have a quality issue. By having documentation available, you completely take that excuse away if I didn't go back and look at it. It's not in the drawer anymore, it's right with me. When you do that, you shorten the cut-in time. So many procedures, when they're complicated, actually say, hey, we wrote the procedure on April 1st, and we're gonna cut it in on April 15th because it takes 2 weeks to train everybody about the new procedure before we actually implement it. So if you can shorten that time, again, you create value in bringing it together. For those of us who are maybe aging beyond our original expiration date here, you find out that, readability becomes a problem. I was really psyched about having an Apple Watch until I tried to figure out to read half the apps on it. It required me to stop, put my reading glasses on to figure out what my watch was trying to tell me. When you have something like Realware with the ability to give you that information, instead of bending, looking, trying to see through things, you have now, again, a hands-free, lower friction way to get through that on the human factor side. And then I think what's really important is cultural norms. And I'm going to tell you a quick story because I think it's worth illustrating what I think about empowered workers when they have access to information and control. And this is really important. There was a company years ago called Rosemont Industries, had about 70% of the market share for pitot tubes in the US and for the US military. This concerned the Pentagon. They sent me there to do a white paper study on this company to understand, are they going to be able to sustainably build this stuff? And to this day, I remember a conversation I had with a 17-year-old line worker in that factory who was running a wave solder machine. And I talked to him, I said, hey, I noticed that you've got SPC charts here and you've got this activity here, so lots of documentation sort of around his process. I said, what do you think about all this? And he said to me, I love it. I love it. And now that was expecting a lot of things, but I was not expecting emotion from a young kid on a manufacturing line to say he loved it. And I was like, wow, why do you feel so strongly about this? He said, because before, I would be working in my site, and a bunch of engineers would show up, shove me out of the way, work on my machine, run some boards through, fix something, and then say, don't screw up again, and they'd walk away. And I felt terrible. He says, today, I monitor what's happening, I'm engaged with this data, and when I see a deviation, I pick up the phone and call the engineers and say, get down here and fix my machine before I make a bad part. Think about that as a culture in your workforce, in your factory, in your field force, when they feel empowered to have the information, to have the access to that, to feel pride and control in what they're working on, and then driving action, right, through those action verbs and action language that we'll help them with to go make something happen. That cultural norm, I think, is hugely important. It's going to make a differentiator for adopting the HMT-1, I believe, because people are going to feel good about wearing it. For data visualization, a lot of things can be said. Again, I talked about the firefighter. We've now got squads of firefighters for the first time going into fires where everybody can afford to have a thermal imaging camera and see what's happening in the facility. But the incident commander on the outside, he's tied to a ruggedized laptop. Maybe he's tied to a tablet now that he's carrying around. He's not, in order to stay connected to all the information that's required to manage the scene, he has to actually be away from the scene rather than being engaged in leading. The HMT-1 kind of access gives him the ability to stay connected as an incident commander to all the information that's happening, but also to lead and observe the site real time with a device that is actually rugged enough to handle the situation. So I think when you look at first responders, firefighters, you look at EMTs, you look at policemen, tremendous amount of opportunity here to use this device to increase incident command. Also, if you look at some of the body cam footage that's out there for police, it's pointing in the wrong place in most of the cases. Right? You really like to have a camera that's going where they are working with it. Again, human factors, when you're out there in the factory and you've got a wall of dials, hard for people to go read, understand, assimilate. When you've got contextual information being pushed to you by the device. You can now have it designed with color, you can have it with size, you can get absolute information that tell you about the system, just overcoming the human factors limitations. And think about 1 and 2D barcodes now. Before, you'd have a scanner, you might get something. Now you can actually have work instructions in 2D where you can look at it with the HMT-1, explain what's happening, give guidance, drive things forward. So I think it's huge in terms of that. And that ability is today. There's nothing virtual reality about that. It's able to be done now. Again, all of this enhances your situational awareness, and it's finally connecting the worker to all of this data that's out there in machine learning and AI. So again, they're more effective. On the mobile forum, to talk about this, obviously, you remove friction by making work orders process faster, right? You do things faster with that. You get document flow documented. You're able to improve compliance. And that's no small thing when you're seeing aviation or in your other safety areas and online work. Improving that compliance is a big risk that companies face today. So it's a big value that's created there. And it speeds the creation and completion of job flow. So, kind of summarize the talk here and get us to lunch where we can enjoy ourselves and talk a little more about how exciting the HMT-1 is. Number one, we're going to free our hands. It is truly important. Walk away from here, understand one thing: the future is voice. It is the only interface that's going to allow people to interact as we have for millennia together. It removes the friction and creates value, and that's why it's going to be adopted. It enhanced humanity is basically inevitable. We already see it with, asking your phone to do addition for you, or a math problem, or using Google as a sort of a lookup function. People are going to keep surrounding themselves with things that allow them to have access to greater information. This is an information revolution, and that is just unstoppable. People are going to keep surrounding themselves with more of that. And finally, quality of life is precious, right? Whether you're talking about the kind of things that could affect Travis Hill and work he has, or you're talking about improved safety for your workers where they go home in the same condition they went to the office that morning, this is an opportunity to help do the right thing for people around the world. And the thing that I'm excited about with RealWare is it's the real deal. It's out there right now, able to do these things, and we haven't even begun to really get all the development that can be done with the software to make it specialized for additional situations. So with that, I'll kind of wrap up and say thank you very much. Excited to be here today. Hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon.